Hi gang, it's John O'Brien, your video professor. Until further notice, that is. Miss seeing you folks face to face, but here we are via YouTube. I guess an advantage in this is you can split this up into smaller segments. You don't have to watch all. You're going to try for 15 minutes tonight at once. Or for the very brave among you, you can watch it more than once, right? So we had always talked about how layering the learning helps. Repetition is key to remembering. So continue to read the textbook before the lecture, skim it, read it in sections, and then watch the video, and then review. I would encourage you to take handwritten notes from the video, and layer it, right? You can do it again and again. I mean, we all kind of have this time on our hands now when we've been, in a sense, kind of thrown out of work. You know, a lot of you out of work. So I'll talk with you tonight as I'm here in the studios of Nyasa. And background noise, yes, tonight I decided to bring two dogs. I think your class missed it, but one of my dogs walked right through the lecture last time, so she's in the background playing a bit. So hopefully you're not in the background, hopefully you're engaged. Current events, keep up on current events. At some point, actually our third exam, which will be administered on the date that we do on the date I gave you originally, you'll have a week to complete it, will be made up of 3 essays. You'll be asked to combine textbook and lecture material, that's this stuff, with current events. So I'm giving you some current events. This just popping up on the screen tonight. This is actually Happy St. Patrick's Day. Trump-backed stimulus as virus spreads to 50 states. So with many businesses shut down, we're sequestered at home. People can't work, right? So the government now, bipartisan Democrats and Republicans, proposing to send Americans paychecks. I'm not sure where we would spend it. Amazon.com probably good for them. It's tough to spend money when the restaurants are closed. At any rate, hang in there. Follow the advice of our health authorities. Not only the advice, but the mandates, which basically means stay home, okay? Stay away from crowds. Don't cough on or sneeze on people. Wash your hands. All that stuff you're getting, right? I'm not a health expert, but I have been a history of pandemics, and this is not the first one humanity has seen. Fortunately for us, it's one that we can control, right? By being smart, by stopping the spread of disease. If the disease can't spread, it dies, it can't live. So stay home as much as possible. When you're out, make sure you're covering your cough and not touching things. They're saying now the virus, COVID-19, can live on hard surfaces like stainless steel for up to 3 days, all right? And maybe on cardboard for up to a day. So if you're getting stuff delivered to your house, be a little wary there too. A little dilution of bleach in water, they tell me, can kill this stuff. So stay healthy, folks, stay rested, keep up your own immunity. So there's some current events. More urgently, I think for us, I am putting information up on Blackboard on a regular basis, almost every other day. This is what went up actually yesterday. YouTube video. On the YouTube video, we discussed the current chapter 31. In that video, I'm talking about the stagnation of the Ottoman Empire in Russia as those nations moved through the 19th century. They didn't liberalize politically, nor did they really in any major way industrialize economically. And in some sense, that made them laggards. They lagged behind Western European and North American nations that liberalized their politics, right? Liberté, égalité, fraternity, as the French said after 1789, and began to build factories, right? So it doesn't mean that the Russians or the Ottomans were somehow inferior people. Their militaries were probably inferior, right? But that says nothing about the morality or aesthetics of people, their ethics, right? It says nothing about them as human beings. What it means is their economies and their militaries fell behind the advances the West was making. Right? So, what do we got here? The announcements. See the video lecture, which is, I'll put this one up as soon as I'm done. Answer questions about the lecture in the comments section of YouTube. You all know how to do that. So right under the YouTube video, like, hey, I didn't know, someone put a question, good question. Hey, if the Japanese defeated the Russians after the Battle of Tsushima, Russo, Japanese War 1905, why didn't they invade Russia? And I had to think about it for a minute. Well, primarily they were a naval power. In fact, the British had built their navy for them and taught them how to use it. They weren't a marine force where they could land on the shores of eastern Russia and invade it. Russia was a vast country. It would have been really stupid to try to invade Russia from the east, when in reality what the Japanese wanted was control of Manchuria, right? Kind of northern or northeastern China. And the Russians and the Japanese were both intent on gaining control of Manchuria. With the Russians knocked down, at least temporarily, the Japanese could begin to move in to Manchuria. In fact, they will. In 1931, they'll claim Manchuria as a colony. So there was my answer, and I typed that in so you can see that in the comments from the last video on the first half of this chapter 31. We'll do the second half of the chapter tonight. What else? So leave questions in the comment section. Also engage in discussion through Blackboard discussion board. Where is that? That's in the content section. Where are we over here? Of this course. Content's up here. Okay. Click on that. I'll show you how to do it in a moment. What else am I putting up there? Current events. So here's an article from Salon on what Chinese doctors learned from the coronavirus, the COVID-19, like what they learned. I think that's pretty valuable. We in class were talking about this. Sorry to be kind of Trumpian here, but we were talking about this several weeks ago because my colleagues in China were dealing with it. They've learned some lessons, right? What works, what doesn't work. I think that's a valuable article for us to read. Complete chapter 31 quiz. Okay, there's another announcement on that. So chapter 31 quiz has been posted up there. I think it's due on Monday. Check the deadline. And email me within Blackboard, or you can email me at my SUNY JCC address if you have questions. There's not a lot of spam coming in, so I guess even the spammers are sequestered at home, wherever they might live. I guess they don't have computers there, so I'm not getting as much spam email, so I can filter yours pretty quickly. So how do we get to the discussion board? Well, let's see if this works for me, right? It's kind of embarrassing if it doesn't, but we're all making adjustments to the online world, right? Contents, that's what I see. This is what you would see. Depending on your class, I'm kind of taping this, so to speak, for both my face-to-face class, so you guys who used to meet with me Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11 o'clock, but also for my so-called hybrids, which would meet with me only once a week and do a whole lot of this online stuff other days. So my 8:30 group in Jamestown on Tuesdays, or my 10 o'clock group in Dunkirk on Thursdays. So this is the one from my 11 o'clock face-to-face, but they all should look kind of same. So there's quiz number 30. What else do we have up here that you can see? Well, for the face-to-face students at 11 o'clock, you had group presentations. And another question, really good one, I had from somebody was, hey, my group's scheduled to present on April, whatever, the 13th. What are we going to do? You should work together as your group still, preferably online, not face-to-face. Create a Google Doc or Google Slide presentation. Send it to me. I'll post it for everybody, and I'll send them the review sheet like, hey, what did you think of this presentation on Societies at Crossroads or the Battle of Tsushima, whatever it's going to be. And so it'll be similar, but you just won't be standing up in front of the group. I don't expect you to YouTube your presentation. I'm not sure how you would if you're in three or four different locations, but you can collaborate digitally on a Google Slide and give it to me, and I'll put it up for everyone else. Here's our revised syllabus that actually explains that. For you hybrid people, we didn't have group presentations, we had individual presentations. You're like, what am I supposed to do? I was supposed to present this week or next. What I would ask you hybrid students to do, again, the 8:30 or 10 o'clock class, Jamestown or Dunkirk, manage the forum, manage the discussion. I'm going to put up a couple of discussion questions, and people will respond, they'll ask their own questions. You be the manager of that forum instead of presenting as an individual, okay? So for the hybrid students, instead of doing what I'm doing now, basically, get into that forum and talk to people in the forum and try to answer their questions, right? You're still kind of the presenter, but you're not presenting through the discussion forum. Where is it? Well, let's see if it works. It's chapter 31 discussion. Well, it looks like it's working for me, but nobody's replied yet, so what's going on? How is nationalism an additional challenge to the Ottoman Empire in the 19th century? Answer the question, right? What decisions did Japan make to move beyond the stagnation experienced by Russia, China, and the Ottoman Empire by the late 19th century? So what you would do is, especially for you face-to-face students who haven't done this before, hit reply, and Nothing happens. Hit reply, and okay. What's going on, I think, with all of our internet is everybody's watching Netflix because they're stuck home, so things are a little bit slower. But you'll be able to reply. Maybe some of you are doing this 3 in the morning when there's a little more bandwidth and getting up. So it's thinking about it. If you have questions and you can't get into the discussion board, email me. A couple of people did, and I think I fixed it. Well, this is an adjustment for me as well as you. We'll keep trying, okay? We'll keep trying, and we will all learn something, not only about history, but about online learning. Thankfully, my slides are not online, so I'm actually using an older technology called a flash drive, which is going to work even if all my neighbors are sucking up the bandwidth on Netflix or whatever we're doing, right? So, last time, well, come on, computer. Okay, there we go. Last time we talked about the Ottoman Empire. My God, it's huge in 1800. This is purple outline. And then it loses territory. It loses the orange, a little bit of North Africa here. Very importantly, Greece. The Greeks broke away from the Ottoman Empire. We're Greek. Why we're living under the Turks? We have this tradition that goes back to Homer and even before. We have our language, we have our alphabet, we have Uzo. If you don't know what Uzo is, it might be something you want to try before the end of this sequestration is over. No, just kidding. That breaks away with the help of the Russians and the British, actually. Lord Byron swimming across the bay there. Serbia, keep an eye on Serbia too. Serbian people. We're Slavic, we're Orthodox Christians. Why are we living under the Turks? They don't respect us, they tax us too harshly, blah, blah, blah. So nationalism is a really difficult phenomenon to understand. Nationalism can unite people, right? When we talked about the French Revolution, vive la France, right? Like the French are, defeating, French volunteer soldiers are defeating the Prussian and Austrian troops, right? Because it was their country, damn it, okay? They had imprisoned the king and then killed the king, so France belonged to the people of France, right? We're going to kick out the foreign invaders. Nationalism can unite people. So in a previous chapter, it united people who felt themselves German. We're German, we're Lutheran, maybe Catholic, with Hansel and Gretel and good beer, right? We're going to join together. Plus, Bismarck made that happen. People of Italy, hey, we're Catholic, we're Italian, we have this tradition, and I'm using some stereotypes here, I don't mean any offense, right? It's actually good food, right? We should be one, right? So Giuseppe Garibaldi from the south, and Camillo de Cavour from the north, put Italy together. So nationalism can unite people if they see themselves sharing the same nationality. But in the Ottoman Empire, that ain't going to work, okay? Because you have Bosnians and Herzegovinians and Albanians and Montenegrins and Greeks and Bulgarians and Serbians, Romanians and Hungarians up here and Turks and probably some Shia Muslims over here and Iraqis and Kurds and others, Egyptians. If each of them gets their own nation, the Ottoman Empire is going bye-bye. Well, where's the Ottoman Empire today, folks? It's gone, right? What we have left today is mainly Central Anatolia, which is Turkey. It's a democracy, actually, right? Where people are mostly Turkish, who would see themselves as ethnically Turkish, right? So nationalism can unite or divide. It just depends, okay? Look at the United States in this same period. The United States had rival nationalisms. Right? The Union or the Confederacy, and it's split. It gets put back together by war, right? But it takes a long time, I think, for the Americans to sense Americanness, all right? Instead of Southern interest or Northern interest, all right? Russia would also be a multi-ethnic state, although its major problems were a lack of industrialization, not enough factories, especially gun-producing factories, and a lack of democracy, at least a lack of liberalization, where the Tsar would share power with at least someone, right? So the Tsar was an autocrat, had all real power. We noted that rebellion, not really revolution, rebellion in 1905, that created a parliament that really didn't do much. Russia did begin to industrialize, which tended to make a whole lot of unhappy factory workers, okay, who could now be inspired by intellectuals, not me, who are Marxist, right? Like, you're being exploited, you should take over the factories, get rid of the government, the factory workers should run the factories and the government. There's these kind of radical ideas, these radical ideas post-1848, right? That the Russian proletariat can be inspired by, right? So we're going to see a different type of revolution in Russia in 1917 as opposed to like France in 1789. Right? It's going to be inspired, well, as we'll see, there'll be two revolutions in Russia in 1917, but the ultimately successful one will be communist, Marxist, Bolshevik in nature. So what else about Russia? Failure to liberalize its politics, slow industrialization, freeing of the serfs, which was nice. Thank you, Alexander II. But if you're a poor serf, you have no education, you own no land, you have no money. Maybe the landlord doesn't own your labor anymore, but now you're going to work for him for just a couple rubles a week. It doesn't change the situation that much. And I think the example last time in the previous video was, with all great gratitude for the end of slavery in this country, the lives of poor people of African origin in the South materially did not change that much. Yes, they were free to move. Some would move north. They could reconnect their families. If they could find them, they could start their own churches. But materially, most of them are still going to remain poor and tied to the land under a new system called sharecropping. So we like to look for abrupt changes in history, but often there are periods of slow change and even continuities. So China, right? Part 2 of chapter 31. The Chinese Empire under siege. Talk about an autocracy, right? So one family is ruling China. From when? From the mid-1600s until 1911, right? We have the Manchu or Qing dynasty, right? What happens kind of in the early part of the 19th century? Well, the British, right? The British had been buying a lot of Chinese goods. And as we know kind of from that McCartney mission from a few chapters ago, when the British show up and want to sell things to Qianlong, the emperor, he's like, basically, get lost, you stinky barbarian British people. We'll sell you our tea and our porcelain because you can't live without our superior stuff, but we don't want any of your crap. That was like, what, 1796. Within 3 or 4 decades, the situation changes, right? China does not industrialize, nor did it liberalize its politics. For a long period of political evolution, the British had, right? I mean, we go back to the 13th century, the Magna Carta. Slowly, especially the so-called Glorious Revolution of 1688, 1689, the king has to share power with at least some people, wealthy people. But slowly there's more representation in Britain. Okay? More people buy into the British system. It had industrialized. It was by the 1830s producing guns and cannons and even kind of steam-powered sailboats in their factories. China was not. China had beautiful culture, beautiful people, beautiful aesthetics, right? Great morality, perhaps. But it had fallen behind materially, economically, and I would argue politically. So the government controls foreign trade, and the British are buying all the stuff, right? Tea, right? We know tea, but they're buying tea because the Americans throw it overboard in 1773 in Boston. But the British balance of payments is very poor. They're buying more stuff from the Chinese. So here China, here's our money, and the Chinese are buying almost nothing from the British. Well, the British found something the Chinese actually would purchase, not the Chinese government, but the Chinese people, and that was opium, right? Basically heroin, grown in the hillsides of British India. We're going to connect to a future chapter there. The British had taken control of much of India from the Mughals and grew opium, right? And shipped that opium to China. When the Chinese government tried to prohibit it, get that stuff out of our country, the British, with their kind of steam-powered paddle wheels, could go up the Chinese rivers, bribe the customs officials, and basically push drugs upon the Chinese people. And the Chinese government is mad about that. I'm not sure they were so mad because of people becoming addicted and even dying of opium, but because the money's starting to flow out of China, right? So now Chinese money is flowing ultimately to Britain, and that's not good for your nation, an unfavorable balance of trade. So when the Chinese government finally says, British people, get out of here, we're not going to buy anything from you, we're closing our ports, the British decided to declare war on China. Okay, so this is a war to force drugs upon China. And the British had the gunpowder to win this war. China is essentially humiliated. Okay? Proud Chinese government, it had been in power for, where am I? 1842, well, almost from 1642, so about almost 200 years, not quite, is humiliated. The British impose unequal treaties. Okay? China, you have to pay us for this war, even though the British declared it. By the way, before I make all the British seem really awful people, there were members of Parliament, there were enlightened people in Britain who said this is war. William Gladstone was one of them, said this is a stain upon our moral conscience or something like that. So look, it's not all the British people. It's mainly the business class who are afraid of losing that big Chinese market, which at this time was, you have to Google this, fact check me. I'm gonna guess was probably 500 million people, okay? That's a lot of toothbrushes to sell if you're a British toothbrush manufacturer, if you get my drift, okay? So, unequal treaties, the Chinese have to pay the British take Hong Kong, and other foreign powers move in. Here come the Americans, here come the Russians. As weak as Russia was, they push into China. Here come the French, especially up from what they call French Indochina or Vietnam, which they were creating a colony there in the soon to be in the 1850s. Who else am I thinking of? The United States, okay? So, foreigners come to control much of the Chinese economy. There will be a rebellion. There's going to be 2 rebellions in China. The first one, frankly, I don't recall learning a lot about this when I took this course, but a rebellion that takes the lives of tens of millions of people probably should at least be mentioned in a class like this, right? So the Heavenly Rebellion, or Taiping Rebellion, 1850s. China is being dominated economically by foreign powers, but it still has that rather antiquated Confucian Qing or Manchu dynasty. So the Taiping Rebellion wanted to destroy the dynasty. They believed that Tian was with them or heaven was with them. One of the leaders claimed a relation to Jesus of Nazareth. They argued fairly radical things like women being equal to men and all people should be equal economically. Whoa, this is kind of far-sighted. And they're crushed. Okay? The Chinese government crushes this rebellion against them. The foreign powers helped the Qing dynasty. The French and the Americans and the British and Russians, the Japanese were moving in by this and did not want to see this weak government overthrown by something else. They were quite happy with the weak Qing government, so they helped it crush this rebellion. A lot of people died because agricultural land was destroyed. So when armies marched through your wheat or rice fields, paddies, during planting season, there's nothing to harvest come harvest time, right? So there's agricultural devastation. And in the end, the old order remained in power, right? Still the Qing family, the Qing dynasty, although maybe 20 million people died. 20 million people. Okay? So that's what we call it, by the way, a rebellion. Okay? It's not a revolution. Remember, revolution changes something politically. Rebellion, you go up against the power and you fall back. You fail. Looks like it just pulled 2 slides in. Okay? Reform, make sure I didn't go too far. Okay. Reform was frustrated. There were Chinese intellectuals who saw the need for change. The imperial family largely resisted reform. There was an emperor who pushed for reform for about 3 months, died mysteriously. Okay. His aunt, the Empress Dowager, as she's called, took power, and she was an old-style absolutist, all power, Confucian society. So you have government advisors who are wearing like the traditional silk gown of the Confucian Mandarin officials. Just as an example, what did that mean? These men would never cut their fingernails because that was a sign of status. I don't have to work with my hands. My fingernails are like this long, all curled up, right? So these were the people advising the Chinese government. So